What I want to first start out with, and today we're going to head back over to Chicago. We're going to head to Chicago. And I want to first start out with this. There was a point that I wanted to make not too long ago in regards to this report from Chicago.gov, right? This is from the local governing body of Chicago. And when I brought this up, I wanted to make a point concerning the demographics of those who are asylum seekers in Chicago. Now, for many of you who may know this already, some of you may not know this already, depending on how long you've been, following me on this channel. This was a report that came out from the local governing body of Chicago, right? Chicago.gov, and it's discussing its homeless population. Now, as of now, and I'm sure from now until forever, right? Chicago has now made two classes of homeless people in Chicago. There's two classes of homelessness. There are asylum seekers and non-asylum seekers. Asylum seekers are here in the green. Non-asylum seekers are in the blue. Non-asylum seekers are obviously Chicago citizens, right? Asylum seekers are those who cross the border illegally, those who I like to call Biden's migrants, right? I want to get into some data concerning the demographics of those asylum seekers, who they are and their age. One of the things that I've said multiple times, and a lot of people say this when discussing, the migrant crisis, we talk about how it's majority single males that are crossing the border. It's majority young single males crossing the border. You're sold on this idea and this thought that these are all a bunch of just families and women and children, and they use that to tug on your heartstrings. But the reality is that these are a bunch of men, not even relatively young men at that, right? That are coming into your cities, into your neighborhoods, and into your states. And I want to get into that right now just to prove that point. So let me zoom in a little bit closer so you can see this better. Okay. Looks like I zoomed in a little bit too much, but let's come out just a little bit. That should be good enough. So as you can see here, it states, let me zoom just a little bit more. Okay, good enough. So as you can see here, where it says asylum seekers, race and ethnicity of asylum seekers. These are the race and ethnicity of asylum seekers in Chicago. 97.8% Latino. And this is important as we move forward into the main topic of today's discussion, right? So asylum seekers, race and ethnicity, 97.8% Latino. Got that? Okay, good. Gender of asylum seekers, 79.1% male, 20% female, and 0.1% T people, right? But let's stay there on the 79.1% male. This adds to the fact, and it proves the point that so many of us have been making, is that it's majority men that are crossing the border. It's majority men that are in these shelters, right? But they sell you on this whole fairy tale surrounding women and children. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that there are no women and children in these shelters and that there are no women and children crossing the borders. Obviously, we know that to be true. When I was in Chicago, for Christmas. I spent my first Christmas back home in Chicago for the first time in like 10 years. I went with my family, me and my son, my wife, and whatnot, right? And my wife wanted to go downtown because she always likes to go downtown. If it was up to me, we would just sit up in my parents' house all day and I'd watch ESPN with my dad, right? But my wife always wants to go downtown. And when we went downtown, I can tell you with my own eyes, there were a lot of women and children on the streets. And it was something, I'm not going to lie to you all, to see it in real time, it was definitely jarring. It was definitely jarring to be there in the winter. It was pretty cold. And to see them just outside downtown, right? So I'm not denying that they exist. That's not the argument. The argument and the issue is that the media keeps selling you on this sob story about women and children. But the reality is that it's 80%, almost 80% men, as you can see here in Chicago, that's crossing the border and coming into the country and then coming to Chicago. 80% men. And out of that 80%, 79.1% to be exact, age of asylum seekers. Under 18, 15.1%. 18 to 24, 18.3%. 25 to 34 years of age, 42.7%. 42.7%. 35 to 44, 18.8%. So one of the things that people love to say and that you hear over and over again, and I hear this a lot on social media, is that these are military-aged men crossing the border. These are military-aged men crossing the border. They are. It's true. And here's the data that proves that here in Chicago. It is overwhelmingly majority military-aged young men, 79.1% to be exact, with 42.7%, almost half of them being aged 25 to 34. So I just wanted to prove that point, because that's something that, we state all the time. People like me state all the time. I state all the time, but I've never shown the data to actually prove that point. And I like to prove the things that I say are true when the opportunity presents itself. So you all know that I'm not just talking out of the side of my neck, right? When I say something, it's true. It's definitely true. Now, what I want to do is that I want to move over into the meat of today's discussion. That's what I'd like to do. I want to move over into the meat of today's discussion, because what I want to touch on is the fact that as we speak, literally thousands of Biden's migrants are being permanently housed all throughout the city of Chicago as we speak. Not a few, not a couple hundred, thousands, and quickly, really fast. As you can see here, that's the title of the Chicago Tribune article. It's titled, "City and State Quickly Moves Thousands of Biden's Migrants from Shelters into Homes Across the South and West Side of Chicago. But will they stay? Question mark. Of course they will." And shout out to the South and West Side of Chicago. Got them all in your neighborhood, huh? We're going to touch on that in a moment.